Hello friends, this is Ganesh and video number 37 on ABAP. So in this session I'm going to take a concept called Authorization Object. So most of you aware of this concept or at least face some issue about working on any transactions or data or some other objects as well. So it's a very common error we are facing in our SAP system is you don't have an authorization to do that. Okay, so that is the one which we are going to see on this session. So I will start with how the authorization object has been designed in SAP, and then we'll slowly try to find a standard authorization object, because you don't want to create, if depends on the business requirement, directly go to the custom authorization. We'll try to find an authorization object for a particular field or depends on the business need, and then try to use it, and then if it is not, then we go with the custom authorization object. Will create for a transaction and will create for a table data and try to apply for a particular user, and we'll see how it's reflect actually in a program. So excuse me, that is the overall session of this particular video. Let's get into the slides, then I will take you to the system as well. So authorization object is, it's simple. In general, you need some authorization to access an object or a data, very specific, a transaction or a table or a data in a product. So we are in a SAP product. Okay, so they want to secure the particular data or an object from the specific users and not from everyone, so from a specific user. So the finance people, they doesn't want to know some other details about like HR or very detailed information I'm talking about. So the same way HR people doesn't want to see some reports, maybe it is relevant, is not relevant for HR people. So that is the way we can group the people, and we can just assign the authorization. So whoever has a authorized or authorization for a particular object or transaction or data, they're able to see it. Okay, it's very generic meaning of authorization. It's very simple to understand what is authorization or authorization object. So now we are going to see how that is managed or designed or used in the product called SAP. Okay, so first one, how the authorization is actually designed in SAP. So I just repeat the same where I do it in Badi as well. But it's like once you understand the design, then using the particular object or a concept is very simple. Okay, so that's what I will just go to for the design first. So I have a transaction. Okay, transaction is one layer I can say. I consider this is one another layer. So on top of a transaction, there is one layer called object class and authorization object. So here in this layer, we are going to create a field for the particular transaction. I mean, transaction is nothing but in SAP, everything is a data. Every data has its own field, right? So if you take company code, plan, transaction, program ID, everything is mapped with a database table field. So transaction is also mapped with the database table field. We simply call it T code, right? So on in the first layer, we are going to create an object class. So that is the hierarchy we have to use it, and then the authorization object. So here the relation between object class and authorization object is one is to n. It's like one project, you can create one object class and you can have n number of authorization objects for the same project. So one object class can hold more than one authorization objects. And in the same layer, we are going to create the fields on based on which value, which field our authorization should work, based on a transaction field or based on a company code, based on the plant or based on the program field, whatever it is. Okay, so every data has its own field, so we need to create a field. N number of fields you can create under one authorization object. And most popular field we have in the authorization is activity field. It's going to be used for what kind of activity along with the data, what kind of activity is going to be added in the authorization object. It may be a create, change, display, delete. It actually lot of values are available. I will show you in the system. So that is one of the frequently used field in the authorization object is activity. ACTVT is the field name. Okay, so those fields are we are going to add it in the particular layer, and this layer transaction is SU21. Okay, and second layer is profile. So profile is a place where you are going to maintain the value. So here you added only the fields. You added a field for a transaction and you have to maintain a value for the field, right? What are the transactions you decided to maintain? It may be your like a project has 10 custom transactions. So I want only 3 for this user, I want only 4, I want only 6. So you have to maintain it, right? So those values to be maintained in a place called profile. So you can map this with standard also. So standard also, you have a standard authorization object for a transaction code, and they're maintaining all kind of transactions over there, or some transaction they maintain star. Normally in sandbox level they maintain a star for all the transactions, people might use it. Or once you go to the development or quality or productions, the transactions, the number of list of transactions might vary of that. Okay, so those they are going to maintain in a PFCG transaction. And then so another layer, the third layer is role. So role is actually playing a major part in the authorization objects. Okay, I have an object. I have values for the object. Example, you can take transactions. I have 3 custom transactions are maintained in my authorization field. Then on top of it, we are going to create a role, because a role is going to act as a bridge between your authorization object and the user. Okay, so that is a very important area of the entire authorization object concept. And in a role, you can have one authorization object can have um, available or can be mapped with more than one role. Okay, so we are creating a role for finance, one role. We are working on 3 different projects. So we are going to use 3 different roles, and each role there may be few programs to be maintained in role 1 and role 3 as well, and a few programs to be maintained in role 2 and role 4 as well. So that is the way I'm saying one authorization object can be mapped with multiple roles. Okay. I will show you while searching the object, one authorization object is maintained in multiple roles. Okay, so that is the reason if you create any transaction, new custom transactions, and we are going to assign to the user, so make sure this particular authorization object is not repeated in any of the roles which the user already has. Okay, otherwise one role saying it's not allowed and another role is saying you can allow the transaction, that is a mess up. Okay, always it's a little mess up. Normally we are not going to work very bigger one, but if you're going to work very bigger project, obviously authorization objects plays a very big role on it. Normal single program and very simple project is fine, but as a bigger one, always you should know the design, how the authorization is designed. Then it will be very easy for you understand the places how we can map, because few things we don't have an authorization in our normal client system. So at least we know the design, so we are able to understand, we're able to ask, so these are the areas which we need, these are the roles we need, this is my authorization objects. So many things we can discuss with the people who have authorization of doing this, normally business people or security people. Okay, and the final layer is user. So after the role, you have the user. So you can go in the bottom up. User has a role, and role have a profile as well as your authorization object. It's actually both are almost same, because single transaction we are doing it. It has authorization object, and yep. Then This one is going to be checked in a different transaction or different program, wherever you want. Maybe in enhancement also we are able to use the authorization authority check object statement to just check whether the user has an authorization for an object or a data. Okay, so that is the one. Another one is yeah, okay. User role, normally how we are going to map, like one user can have n number of roles. Probably you might got a chance to just go through the roles tab in SU01 transaction. You will see all, means multiple roles are mapped. Okay, depends on the project, depends on the transaction you need. It's all I'm talking about the client system, not the rental or a test system. Okay, and there are two things. You can assign a role from a PFCG transaction, or you can go to SU01 manually also, you are able to do it. Okay, so that is the one. And this one I already mentioned. Try to find a standard authorization object, because everything is a field. So if you go and search this authorization object through a field, definitely you will get a lot. And another way of understanding the authorization object, so the user have multiple roles possible, and the authorization object can be, one authorization object can be maintained in different roles as well. Okay, so example, one transaction one is mapped with role 1 and role 3, depends on the design or requirement, and the data one is also mapped with role 1 and role 2, and this is some other objects, maybe it's mapped with only one role, and this is another object is mapped with other two, role 2 and 3, and another transaction mapped with role 2. So these are the combinations of how the authorization object is mapped with the role. Okay, so yeah, that's it about this. I think now you have a rough idea about how actually the authorization is designed. These are the hierarchy level. Okay, so any level you can find anything. For example, I want to find a role for the authorization object. Yes, I want to find a user based on the role. Yes, I have a user, I want to know what are all the roles mapped to the user. Yes, so any level of search is possible, and there is a very beautiful transaction to search an authorization object through any level. Okay, I will show you that as well. And relevant transaction, so this is the first transaction which I explained, right? It's a very beautiful transaction, SUIM. Mostly you will get a authorization at least for this. So search authorization object, any level, anything you are able to search through this transaction, SUIM. And SU53, just check the authorization object failure details. Probably you might aware of it. Normally basis people will ask, if you say I don't have authorization, they ask a screenshot of SU53 transaction. That is a transaction where it displays very clearly what is the authorization object and what is the field on it and what is the value. Okay, then they will assign, okay, for this user this authorization object, and the value is not assigned, so they can't directly assign it. You know the hierarchy, right? Authorization needs a role, and the role is act as a bridge between the authorization object and the user. Then they will find an existing role of the user. If they are okay with that existing role, they can add the same authorization object for the particular transaction. Otherwise, they will create a new role and add the authorization object and add it to your user. Then you are able to access the transaction. It may be a standard or custom. Okay, and SU21 object class and authorization object creation. SE20 create authorization field, probably it is not required, because through SE21 also you are able to do it. So what is authorization field? Suppose you want to create a field, maybe a custom field. It's not a material type, it's not a company code, it's not a plant, because those are standard fields already existing. There is a new field, maybe a custom field you want to do it, or there is a standard field which is not at all used. Oh, I'm sorry, not a standard field, because standard field it's all, yeah, sorry, that is an option. Some standard fields doesn't have an authorization at all, so you want to use that particular standard field also, you have to create it first. For example, text fields are not created for authorization. Okay, so mostly master fields are created. Example is text field or date field are not created as an authorization object. If you want to use it, you have to create that authorization field. Okay, so for that, go with SE20 or SE21 also possible. PFCG, this is a bigger place where we are going to assign the role, create the role, assign the values for your authorization object, and map your role and authorization object, and then you're going to map the user for the particular role. Everything you're able to do it in PFCG, at least 2 or 3 transactions, or just doing in one, that is PFCG transaction. And the final one is SU01, assign roles to relevant user. You can do it in a PFCG itself, but if you want to do it, you can go to SU01 and do that. Mostly in your client system, you don't have authorization to do SU01. In sometimes you don't have an authorization to create a role also, because it might mess for other users. So that is the reason we have to request it, they will create it. And if you have a test system, just try using it. Mostly in your client system, be little careful of these transactions. At least the search one is, it's fine. Creating authorization also fine, especially the PFCG. Please be careful, because if you delete by mistake, or if you add something else to the existing role mostly, then it might cause some issues. So please be aware of that. Anything else? Yeah, session overview. So what I'm going to do is, in the session is, I'm going to use the SUIM transaction, and I will show you how to search authorization object based on a different categories. And I'm going to create a custom authorization role. I'm going to create a custom authorization object, class, role, and map it with the user. Okay. And finally, I'm going to check the authorization or transaction data in the custom program. Okay. And using a statement called authority check object. So that is a very basic thing. We are going to use it. And is a dummy user. The reason is, I'm a rental system. My rental system user has all authorizations. So I'm trying to like log particular example, some transaction, AC38 or VA01. I can able to create it, but I can't achieve it. The reason is that particular transaction field is open in some other profile, some other role actually. So that is the reason I'm not able to do it. That is the reason I have a dummy user. It doesn't have anything. It doesn't have any roles. I'm going to create a role. I'm going to assign a role for it, assign a values, and I will show you that. This is actually an optional step for you. If you want to try authorization in your system, you don't want to have a dummy user. But if you want to actually try to learn more deeper in authorization object, if you have a test system, please have a dummy user with very minimal role or with no roles. So that is easy for you to learn the exact concept. And yeah, about ECC and S4HANA. S4HANA, as you are aware, is a different product. That is not a upgrade version of ECC. It's entirely a different product. So there might be a chance some roles, some authorization object standard I'm talking about might be vary, excuse me, between ECC and S4HANA. You found some authorization object, you found some standard role, and you're trying to just see the same thing in S4HANA. It might be not available, or it might available. Okay, it depends. And then there's options of SUIM transaction between ECC and HANA also little different. Screen wise, it's be little advanced. I felt in S4 HANA. I'm going to use S4 HANA only because in ECC I don't have authorization to display the information, display the details. I have authorization for SUIM transaction, but once you search complete, it shows an error. You don't have authorization to view all the profiles or user groups, whatever it is. So that is the reason I prefer to go and use S4 HANA for this practice. And then, syntax of the authority check object statement is authority check object, your authorization object name, and for user ID. This is optional, but I'm going to use it because I'm going to use a dummy user. An ID authorization field name, whatever you used over here, that you have to use. For example, transaction means the transaction field name. Field value of the field. What is the value of the field? Suppose VA01, AC38. You can hard code it, or you can use a variable dynamically. You can do that also. Mostly they will do dynamically in real time. So this is a syntax for authority check object statement. Okay, that's it. Okay, let me get into the system. This is my system, and first I will start with SUIM IM transaction. So as I mentioned, this is my S4HANA. So the screen compared to with ECC is little different. And this transaction is not only for authorization object, it depends on other categories also. You are able to find some user data. I want to find a roles on different users. I want to find a transaction. So many things is available and we can make use of this for authorization object also. Another transaction which I didn't mention in my PPT is SC84, where you are able to find the authorization object. So here you go to other objects and there is an option here, but here the search options are limited. You have to enter like partially the authorization object name or through short description, package and application component. So little limited options to search the authorization object. So preferable is SUIM transaction only. So here what I can do is I want to find the authorization, then go ahead with this option. Like I have to find what are the transactions available or mapped with the user, executable for a user. So if you give the user name, it will just listed out what are the transactions or mapped with this particular user. So the same way you have to find out, I have a role, I want to find out the role has what are the authorization object, or in the reverse way, I have an authorization object, I want to know this authorization object is mapped with which roles. It's like kind of a values list. Okay, so SUIM is a place where you can just find most of your categories. So just play around. Hopefully you might have an authorization for this transaction in your client system. If you have a test or rental system, obviously you will get this access. Okay, so this is, it gets little more time because it get all the things. So here, these are the transactions code. Maybe we'll go with some transaction which we have. Yes. Okay, and AC38. Yes, it has. Okay, find the whole word. Okay, AC38. Okay, so for the user, these are the transaction which is allocated or mapped. Okay, and now I have to find out through roles, through profiles also you can find out. Suppose I have a roles, I want to know what are the authorization object for this. Okay, or I'll find through authorization object, and I want to go with the first one, complex selection criteria, and I have few things. I want to find the authorization object. Okay, for example, for a material type MTART, I want to know what are the authorization object available. As I mentioned, if you want to do any authorization, better for a standard field, better please check whether you have any standard authorization object is available, will make use of it. So this is the authorization object available, and object class, and what is the component ID, and what are the fields. There are two fields over there. Okay, so same thing for plant. If you want to find some works authorization object, so you can give the plant name. So these are the authorization object for the plant. Okay, so it's actually huge. And if you want to find, okay, I have a, one second, let me do one thing. If go with MTART F8, okay, take this authorization object. Okay, now I want to find the role for this. So go to role and keep your authorization object and execute. Then it will display what are the roles. So only one role, I mean that is actually a Z role. So only one role is mapped with this particular authorization object. So this is a way you are able to find out. And I have familiar authorization object is yes. What is our T code? Yes underscore T code is a authorization object for all the transaction code, especially in SAP. So this authorization object, I want to find out it's mapped with which roles. So it is mapped with multiple roles, you can see. And the field for authorization object is TCD, is a field name. Yeah, see, one authorization object, multiple roles they have. And you're able to see the values as well. So what are the values is mapped with the particular authorization object field. Okay, so just go down, lot of values. Suppose if you want to find, okay, through filter, ME star. So these are the transactions which is mapped with this particular field for different roles, okay? And the first role has only one value, MEAS, but the other role has ME21, other third one has lot of transactions are mapped with, which starts with ME. And you have one more option, while searching itself, you are able to find out through a value. Let me show you that also. In a search option, you have an option called values. Okay, so values, I'm saying I want VA, okay, finance, FI star, execute, and then its values has been added, and again execute. So it shows like FI star, so everything is comes here, okay? And if you want to find out a particular transaction is mapped with how many roles, sorry, FI01. So the particular transaction is mapped with different roles. So roles plays a major role. Even though authorization object is only one and the file is also only one, but it has mapped with different profiles and the profiles is mapped with different roles. So technically I'm talking about, okay? In a simple understanding way, authorization object can have multiple roles, okay? And this is not an issue while creating a custom one, because custom one we know this transaction, this profile is going to be added only for this user group, only for this user, so it's fine. But understanding a design, you have to know about this. So just play around with multiple options, try to understand how it's getting designed from the SAP side. So it's very simple to able to replicate the same through the custom transaction, means custom authorization object, okay? And what else? So this is through roles, and the same thing, just play around. I don't want to spend much time on here. And then what else? Okay, next is let's create one custom authorization object, okay? SU21 transaction to create a custom authorization object. The first step is create an object class. Object class can have a number of authorization objects. So for the project, you may create it. So I can say for project 1, this is for project 1, save it. Data saved, and use the same option, create an authorization object. And I'm going to create the authorization object probably for transaction code. So I can say Z transaction code, right? So COD transaction code, and the text for transaction code. If it is available, we can make use of the standard. If not, if it is very specific to the business requirement, then you can create the custom authorization object, and the class would be Z project 1 and enter. So here two options. Suppose if you want to create, okay, I'll go with the existing authorization object. It's already authorization field is already created. It's activity. Yes, it's there. It automatically comes. If not, suppose I don't want to use T code. I want to use my own authorization field. So what I can do is I'm saying Y T code enter. It shows authorization field does not exist. So I showed one transaction where you can create an authorization field. Either you can do that, or in the screen you have an option called field maintenance. Use this option to create your own authorization field. So here click create authorization field and enter the field name, the T code, and data element is transaction code, okay? That's it. Save. You can use either one of the options. Use check table for authorization field or use search for development data element. Mostly we go with this option for any master data. So let me save this YT code, enter. Authorization field can be started with any alphabet. It's not custom. So, but why we prefer a custom is, suppose if you want to delete any authorization field which you used as a standard field name, you're not able to delete it. So that is one of the reason go with Z or Y authorization field. So we are good enough and click save. So activity is the place where activity is a field where we are going to maintain a value which defines the particular action, whether it's a create, save, display. Those also going to be specified in this activation field, activity field. So continue, and it shows we have to assign the permit activities for this field. So click permitted activities, and you have a list, and it depends on your need, you can select it. So I always go with these ones. This is a very simple one, so I go with add, change, display, and delete. Okay, let me take out the create, because for an example I want to show you, right? So I'll go with change, display, and delete, and click save. Save this one. So we are almost done. Continue. So the authorization object is ready. So this there is no tick mark to close this window. You have to use the close option. Close it. Done. And normally we use, if any new profile or new things to be created, we have to regenerate it. But in real time, most of the client, we doesn't have authorization to do the regenerate SAP all, because it regenerate everything. Okay. So with the help of your basis, if really required, they will take care of it. Don't worry. Once it is done, I didn't do that regenerate now. So I'm done with the first step. Authorization object is ready. Next one is PFCG. With the help of this transaction, I'm going to perform role creation, and I'm going to do a profile, means authorization data. I'm going to add it. And before the profile, I need to include my authorization object manually to my role. And then I'm going to add a value, what type of transaction I'm going to decide to allow for this particular authorization. And finally, I'm going to map the role with the user. So these are the 4 things I'm going to do in the single transaction itself. So let's go to PFCG, ZJI roles, create single role. Oh, it's already exists. Very good. CJI roles 2, single role. Is going to create it, and description is optional. If you want, you can add it. Roles for project 1. Okay, and go to authorization. Okay, you want to save this first. Okay, save it. I saved it. Okay, and you know, if you have a profile name, you can include here. Otherwise, use this option. This will automatically generate at the end. So just click change authorization data. My roles are getting created. And now just use this option. Do not select template, because I'm going to use manually and I have only one authorization object to be included. So I'm ignoring that option, and here I'm going to use this manually option, and I enter the authorization object name. So my authorization object name is, I forgot, one second. So my project is ZPR1 and okay, ZT code. Okay. ZT code. Okay, it's automatically retrieve or pull from your object class or the authorization object, and this is the profile name. It auto generated profile name, and what are the fields we have added, everything list out here. Okay, so now we have to add ourselves. What are the transactions you feel to assign this particular authorization object? Okay, I'll go with very few now, VE01 and VA02, only these. Okay, VA02 and VA03. Okay, so not create, only change and display. And what activity you prefer to give? Right, you can see change, display, delete, or full authorization means full. Whatever options available, everything is goes there. So change, display, and delete. Save it. Done. Save this. Okay, and once it is done, you have to generate your profile. Just generate it. Here you have an option saying you can able to see the status of your profile. Yes, it's generated. Okay, sometimes it's saved. Make sure you generated it. So our authorization object is ready. Role is ready, and authorization object value is also ready. then go back. Okay, the final one is go to user, add the username. By default, whatever user you logged in, same thing they have to give. But here I'm going to use a dummy user. This is optional for you because, excuse me, as in my rental system, I have authorization in every place, so it's very difficult for me to track it. So that is the reason I have a user ID, dummy user, which doesn't have any authorizations and roles. Because transaction code is the standard field, the data element is transaction code. It might be added in many profiles with different values. So once you try to check the authorization, it sometimes it works as expected, sometimes not. Because for example, VA01 for your authorization object, you are saying that it doesn't have authorization, but in some other profile they've already maintained it's available. Okay, so that is the reason. So here I'm going user 4. Normally my is user 3, but here it's user DC 4, and do the user comparison. Just say full comparison. Yep, done. Close it. Now everything is green. Just save it. Okay. Now if you see SU01 user 4 roles, automatically whatever I have done in PFCG, that is reflected there. Otherwise manually you have to add it. So go to roles here. Okay. Otherwise manually go to SU01 and click change, manually you need to add it. So both the ways it's possible. So I have my roles are getting added here. So this is my dummy user. It doesn't have anything. Okay, any roles, no profiles. If you see 3, it's an actual user. It has lot. So that is the reason normally in authorization it's very difficult to test. If you have a test system, it's very easy to do it. Normally people also advised if you create any new authorization, and normally basis create a dummy user ID to just check your authorization object. Okay, we are almost done. Now go to SE38 to check this authorization object, whatever we have created. CGI authorization object, executable program, local object. So here what is authority check object, and object name is ZTCODT code, and for user, that is user ID. So here we can hard code it. It should be a variable. So I have to create user ID, type uname, value, user DC4. Okay. And what is the ID? My ID is YT code. Okay. YT code and field. What is the field value? Just hard coder, like I'll just check SE38 whether to have access for it or not. Generally it shows no, because I given only VA02 and VA03, and I have another ID called activity, ACTVT, and field value was, so this can be a hard coded, or you can use a dynamic variable also, mostly dynamic variable, because that is the way it will check in your report or program. And the field I'm saying 01, either I have a create option. Okay, now I'm going to use size of RC equal to 0, right? Yes, having authorization, else, right, no, not authorized. Okay, activate it. So activate it and execute it. So it shows no, not authorized, because SE38 I didn't add it. So if I change to BA02, not authorized. Yep, because the activity should be 2 or 3, right? Either create or display only. Yes, having authorization. Okay, so now if I change maybe the for after some time people decided to add some more values, so go here, go to authorization, change authorization data, and do it manually here, and SE38, save it and generate it. Okay, we are done. Now go here and say SE38 with 2. No, it shows as having authorization. So this is a way you have to create a custom authorization object, fields, and the way to just check based on the user as well. Okay, and this activity field is actually optional. It's not every authorization object has this. So the next example I'm going to show how to authorize my database table value. So in that I'm not going to use this activity field. Okay, depends on, mostly for transaction we use this, otherwise not. So hope you have a very basic idea about authorization object. So we'll see the next one. So next one, I have a table already. Let's see. I don't know what is the table name. Just give me a minute. Yeah, this is a table, ZJI employee. I have very minimal record. So employee region, West and East. So I'm going to create authorization object for this particular field, EMP region, and I'm going to restrict based on the value. If it is West, maybe for this particular user number 4, I'm not going to do it. Okay, so that is the way I'm going to do it. Let's see how to do that one. So for that, let me go to my authorization object page. I'm going to create another authorization object. My class is going to be same. Okay, I'll go with region, reg, region, enter. So now the field name, let me just check. The data element is ZEMP region. Okay. I'm going to use EMP region because the field is already available. Yes, if the field is already available in a database table, you may make use of that. And click save. Continue. So my authorization object is ready. I didn't use activity field here. It's not required because it's for a data level. Okay, close it. Now I need to add this to the same role. I don't want to create a multiple role. It's not necessary. If you want, you can do it, but again, it depends on how the business is needed and how the project is designed. The same project, same user, probably we go with the same role. So the same role, I'm going to add manually. ZREG is the object. So here you're able to see the same class. I have the different authorization object, and this is the profile, and here I have a region, the field. I'm going to give a value, so only for East region. Save it and generate it. Okay, let's see how it's getting in my program level. Go to, yeah, it's got closed. 1 second. 38. So I want this. Okay, my authorization object is reg for the same user 4, and my field is EMP region, and the value I am checking is East. Okay, it's actually case sensitive. So how they maintain, the same way you have to do it here, especially for the dynamic I'm talking about. So if you're getting the value from a screen level, make sure you're in a all uppercase or lowercase or camel case, what depends on it. Okay, in that case, you have to use the lowercase keyword in the parameters declaration part. Okay, now let's check this part. Yes, having data authorization, and this is no, not authorized for data. Afterward it, I'll get expecting two right statements. So here east, I'm getting it should be S, and here SE38 also yes. So both are S. So S having data authorization. Suppose I'm checking for west. Well, no, no authorized for data. So this is the way you have to create a custom authorization object, and you can just make use of it. Maybe more than one field also, combination of values you can just try and you can just play around. And this is the way we have to do the authorization check. The testing is actually a challenging part. Always remember, because in a client system, because you that particular user may have different profiles, they may added it, so sometimes yes, sometimes no. Okay, so that's the reason I'm saying. So the best part to test your authorization object is having a dummy user which doesn't have any much roles on it. Then it's very easy to test it. Okay, so otherwise it's very simple. If it is working for a new transaction, and probably it'll be very easy for you. Mostly it's an issue for the existing one. They have a lot of profiles, a lot of things added. Then it'll be a little challenging part. So nothing much. Okay. So just play around with this object, and if you have any doubt, please let me know. Thank you so much for your time, and see you in the next video. Bye.